Well, the weeks after were bizarre because I woke up the next morning. I was already awake from the time that I crashed through the time that I rode to the finish line, to the time that I was in the ambulance, through the time at the hospital. But I was never actually awake until 8:15 a.m. the next morning. And I was sitting up in the chair, and I was sitting up in the hospital bed with my team doctor, Dog, who was in the room with me. And again, I asked him the same question that everybody saw on TV: where am I at? Poor Dog probably answered that question 1,000 times already all night long, but he got to answer it one more time, and this time the light bulb in the head stayed on. So it started really from 8:15 a.m. that morning. I went over to my director's house later that day. I got driven over to his house to rest and recover, and then I did the flight back to Bend, Oregon. When I arrived in Bend, I started training right away. Everything felt a little off. The leg wasn't quite healed, so I went and saw my doctor there. We had some issues with the leg that needed to be solved, so I needed another 6 days rest. So I took 6 days off the bike, started training again. I started training 3.5 weeks before Colorado, and after 3 days of training, I had a fantastic training day, and I came home and I told my wife, Colorado's in 3 weeks, but I only need 2. And that night we went out to dinner. I came back. We started doing one of the blogs to catch everybody up on where my progress had been, how my recovery had been from the Tour de France. And by the time we finished the blog, I was in so much pain that I had to get rushed to the emergency room because I had a blood clot. And the blood clot was collapsing the lung and making it impossible to breathe, and of course put me in difficult pain. The doctor who had first examined me said, you have a blood clot and your lungs collapsed. And I said, there's no way I got a collapsed lung. I just did 60 miles and I was flying. And he's like, you got a blood clot and your lungs collapsed. So they did all the stuff they need to do. They start you on the blood thinners, and of course later when you're on the blood thinners you realize that you can't race your bike again for 6 months. You're not supposed to be riding your bike, and you're not supposed to be doing anything dangerous. Of course, being a professional cyclist, not riding my bike is out of the question. Taking some more precautions, not riding in a group of 100, not crashing in a bike race, doing some precautions to make sure that I don't crash and hit my head and then bleed out there on the side of the road. So there's a real danger in that aspect. And during the month after the tour, I gotten married to my fabulous girlfriend, now my wife, Megan, and so you have to remember that the dangers of me going out and training when you're on blood thinners not only affects me, but it affects my wife and it affects my 3 kids, not to mention my mom and my brothers and sisters. So you always have that in the back of your mind, and every time you're going down a descent, you're always thinking about, let's not make everyone go to a funeral here. So let's take it a little bit easy on the descent and back off, stay calm. I trained with one guy pretty much only, a friend of mine, Sean Mazik. He stays at my place in San Diego all the time. He's a pro with Jelly Bellies. And he was the only one that I felt comfortable training next to for day in and day out. And as I came off the blood thinners 6 months later, and at the end of January, even at training camp, when we were in training camp in December, I trained with the team because we're training easy. But training camp in January, when they're going 100% and going hard and rotating paceline, I refused to train with the team because I still hadn't stopped taking the blood thinners. But as January finished and I came off the blood thinners, what I really found when I started doing the group rides in San Diego is that it was very difficult to get all the thinking from the last 6 months and get rewired to, okay, if you crash now, you're gonna be okay. Right. And so as I found myself doing the group rides, I always found myself still training next to my partner, Sean. And so I just felt always really comfortable training next to Sean the whole time, because that's for the last 3, 4, and 5 months. That was my training partner. So as I found myself in the training rides in San Diego, I just always found myself still next to Sean. It's where I felt comfortable. And then of course, as I went and started racing at Torino Adriatico, then you have to get adapted really fast to the speeds and the dangers again, and just let it slip away. So it does sit in the mind a little bit, but eventually you do push it out. The getting the dangerous part out of your head came back really fast. So I was able to push that out pretty quickly. And again, at my age, I've gone through a lot of crashes and a lot of setbacks, and this was just another one. But of course, for 6 months, you're really thinking about how dangerous it is for you to hit the ground and just bump your head. And so I can bump my head not even do any real damage to my body that you can see, but your brain could be bleeding the whole time, and by the time you get home 30 minutes later, you're dead. So that's the problem with the blood thinner. So you always have that. But I was able to push through that quickly, thankfully, and get back into the groove of the bike racing during Torino.
That's by far the longest you've ever done out of it.
Yes, the longest without racing, the longest without doing. You got to remember, no group rides, no. Okay, maybe I've gone months without racing, of course, but you're still doing the group rides, which is the same thing as a bike race. The intensity is a little bit different, and my thinking's a little clearer because I'm not on the limit like I would be in the bike race. But it's almost more dangerous in the bike race because the level of the riders changes too. So it was the first time for that period ever in my career, and I've been riding my bike since I was 13, where I'd really avoided group rides and stuff like that for that length of time.